Mr. Dartmouth.
Yeah, thank you. I've got three very simple questions. First of all, there are certain areas, notably cars, where the EU's tariffs against US goods are higher than the US's tariffs against EU goods. Does the Commission have any plans to reduce these tariffs so that the tariffs would be the same? And if you don't have any plans, it seems to me that that the strictures that have been put forward in this committee by various colleagues really don't have very much base to them. My second question is, the EU enjoyed a trade surplus with the US last year of $151.4 billion. That's roughly equivalent to the entire gross domestic product of Hungary. Do you, in your view, and in the view of the Commission, is that sustainable? And finally, my final question is a slightly more macro question. Germany, in a very worthwhile and rather admirable way, has accrued to itself a very large trade surplus, equivalent to 7.8% of GDP last year. In the view of the Commission, is that sustainable, and should it be sustained?
Finally, on the EU trade surplus, Mr. Dartmouth, I think there are different ways to define trade surpluses and trade deficits, and we don't necessarily agree with the definition by President Trump, because you can look at it in different ways. It is also, the US have had trade deficits with us in that way for 25 years in goods, but they have a surplus in services. And it's also very much related to pensions and savings and consumer patterns and so on. So we don't calculate it the same way. And I don't give comments on the German economy. The Commission does that annually in the annual semester, and that is where we do our comments. And for the rest, it is really not my task to comment on individual member countries.